To everything, turn seasons, turn. It is the season to turn apartment units. And in general, we are seeing some really strong performance in the apartment market. Today on the Gray Report, we're going to be looking at three different topics. One, looking at sentiment across the multifamily industry from buyers, developers, and lenders. Looking at the NMHC quarterly survey of apartment conditions. We're seeing a lot of stark changes as the idea of where interest rates and what buyers' sentiment is going to be. It's fascinating to look at today versus last year and a couple of years ago. Then from Moody's Analytics, U.S. consumers remain resilient, but blemishes exist. It's not crystal clear. We definitely have some bumps on the road, but generally the economy is doing really well, depending on who you ask. Then from Fannie Mae commercial to residential conversions, we're talking about these office spaces being turned into apartments. Way easier to say than it is to do. Seems like the people that are pushing this idea have the least knowledge of real estate. We'll find out. We're going to get into it. We're also going to look at a deal that's not working out too well. That is a office to multifamily conversion. So strap in, give the Gray Capital YouTube channel a like and a subscribe, and then leave us a comment at any point during this show. We're going to get back to you. Have some fun. So if you're a multifamily investor, active, passive, you're in the right spot. Every single week we're doing this, bringing out the latest data, the latest research, and then giving you our original opinion of what is happening in the multifamily market with real estate, commercial real estate, and the macro economy. You're going to want to watch the full episode, so let's get into it. All right, welcome back to the Gray Report, joined again, every week, by Dr. Matt Bosnagel, Director of Communications and Marketing here at Gray Capital. We're in sunny Indianapolis, Indiana, one of the top rent growth markets in the nation. But Matt, let's talk about this NMHC survey. It's their quarterly survey of apartment conditions. First, before we get into the numbers of what folks are thinking about market tightness, sales volume, equity, debt, what is the NMHC sentiments, or what are we looking at here?
It's their quarterly survey of apartment conditions, and they ask them whether markets are tighter or not as tight, whether sales are active or not as active, whether equity is more available or less available, and the same thing for debt. Is debt easy or hard to get, or expensive or not? And then they kind of tabulate and track that each quarter. And so now we get to compare how are things in April compared to how things are in January.
Well, and it's how people feel they are, right?
Oh, yeah. Though? Well, it's the bottomless pit of human emotion.
But at the same time, it's important to know and understand, because it's obviously built on real experiences, reality. And sometimes, even though it's not the same as how exactly empirically tight, debt might be, how high rates are, what was availability, it's that psychology that impacts human decisions and actions for the future.
And I would say this is a response to change. This is very much like a reactionary measure, or a metric, if you could say, of the market's reaction to change and what they think is changing. So, you could call it sentiment, but the questions are functioned in a way of like, all right, so how has this changed from the past? Better, worse, more available, less available?
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the numbers. Again, like you mentioned, Matt, they break it down into four different categories that they're asking folks about. Market tightness in general. How do you buy a deal? How tight is the market? Sales volume index, and pretty straightforward. How many sales are being done? Equity financing, how easy is it to raise equity? And then debt, availability of loans to buy these deals. Man, you want to look at some of these raw numbers? You want to go straight to the graph? So they have some graphs as well. What's your first? What jumps out to you first?
Honestly, I think the market tightness, relative to where it is before, it almost is half as tight as it was.
So Matt, just so I understand this, 0 is not a tight market, a loose. It's a buyer's market, and then 100, a higher number, would be more of a seller's market and really tight. So the higher the number, the tighter the market.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So things got a little tight. And that was probably the biggest movement here between January and April, was this market tightness index.
And so this number surprised you, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you weren't sure. But to me, it kind of makes sense, I think, from what we've talked about. We've talked about last week. And again, this is April's numbers, so it's, when did they take the survey in April? But if you think about it, listen to the Gray Report episode a couple weeks ago. We're talking about how buyers are coming back into the market. There is a bid. Blackstone just, is buying air for $10 billion. There's a big bid. Institutional capital is coming back into the market. Buyers are showing back up. So it's getting a little bit tighter from last year, which we saw record low sales volumes. You'd imagine it would be kind of the loosest market because not a lot of deals are getting done.
I always thought of last year as the reason why it was low sales is because a lot of people weren't putting them up for sale, but maybe they were putting them up for sale just at too high prices.
Well, there's certainly that was the case, but just because there's less volume to sell, you would imagine then, if there's less volume, if those prices aren't being really bid up, and in fact they started going down, that's how loose the market was.
Okay.
Because no one can make sense of there was a big spread, bid-ask spread. Rates are relatively high. Cap rates were, still too low, and so there wasn't that much volume that was going on.
Okay.
So things stayed, relatively, loose just because there weren't that many buyers that could get deals done.
Okay.
Not
that
as
makes
much
a little bit more
competition
sense.
because there wasn't a lot of competition for deals that didn't make sense.
So you could potentially read a loose market as one that may in the future have lower prices.
Potential, yeah.
It's just a leading indicator because I'm looking at this January 2023 number. Man, it was at 14.
Yeah.
And all throughout 2023 is 14, 26, 21.
And it was a buyer's market. If you wanted to transact at, again, the prices at that point still didn't make sense, which is why there weren't that many buyers, which is why the prices have been coming down, which is why prices are down.
Yeah.
20 to 35% in most markets. And also, reflecting that, equity was also not very easy to get. I mean, going over to the equity index, we can see this all reflected in the sales index also, but the equity index, back in, end of 22 through 2023, October 2022 is down at a 12.
Yeah.
It's not very good. Now we're back at 49. That means that equity is generally back into the market. That means people can do more deals. And that leads to things getting tighter. But also it's because prices have been coming down also. So the deals are starting to make sense. Then even over here at the debt, which I think is just people's perception of there's a combination of just where interest rates are, not necessarily the full availability of liquidity. Because in multifamily, there's been a good amount of liquidity between the agencies, and there's a lot of lenders that are looking to do deals just especially because they're trying to make up from lack of volume. But I mean, we were down at 3, July 2022. And again, a lot of this is the direction of where things were going. We go back to the beginning of, again, the stark difference right here from January 22, the rate increases were really announced, I think in March. And so from January 2022, I mean, we went from 36 to 9. Before that, we were at 71 back in July. July 2021, interest rates were still 0. Rent growth was still 20%. Everyone was just, drunk. I mean, this is the sentiment that would show up. It was the tightest market, 96%. Again, we bottomed out here at 14%. Not too much long after this.
Yeah.
It was as tight can be. The sales volume 79, huge sales volume. Equity was plenty available and debt was plenty available. And that changed very quickly in just a couple of quarters. Now all of a sudden it went down to 9 and to 3 in terms of debt that's available. But to your point earlier, Matt, that we were talking about, it's not necessarily, rates were still lower then. Rates were much lower.
They were like half as much, if not lower, especially in 2022.
Yeah.
That was just, a couple months after the initial rate hikes.
Yeah.
And again, it's governed by fear and reaction to the change.
Yeah, it was this idea that we are in the beginning of a rate hiking cycle with a lot of confident opinions. Ended up not being true that, okay, this is going to lead to a recession here any minute now. And so a lot of fear was put into the market for, I think, legitimate reasons. We've never gone through a rate hiking cycle without a recession. Yeah. So far, we've technically avoided one, although we had 2 negative quarters of GDP and stuff like that, but that does not count.
We don't make those rules.
We don't make the rules. But what you can see here, Matt, is now go to over to this graph. I mean, you see the market peaking, you see it crashing, and then you see we're seeing the recovery right now.
Yeah.
Again, at least in terms of sentiment. And, then bring in, this is, a meta anecdotes, but, I was at a conference last week, Matt, I mentioned in the sentiment for multifamily, is also was very strong, similar to what we're seeing in this report.
Yeah.
A lot of I couldn't find anybody that wasn't bullish on multifamily. For all the reasons that we talk about all the time. It's just too expensive to buy a home. There's good household formation that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Renting's actually never been cheaper than buying a home. And we're also going to see a huge drop off in supply in the next couple of years, even though a ton is being built, right now, today. I think we delivered more apartments in Q1, I think, than we've ever delivered before.
Yep.
In a single quarter.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. So let's look at one of these other graphs. So, debt, again, this is also, represented in the debt and equity financing sentiment. Again, even though rates were lower during this period, this is where the sentiment bottomed out, because this is just where our whole worldview had to be changed.
Yeah.
From living in this period of over exuberance and free money, and very loose monetary policy to incredibly tight monetary policy. And I mean, cash went from trash to king in a couple of months, Matt.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. But you see this recovery, especially on the debt side. And again, it peaked here because that basically represents when the Fed pivoted.
Yeah, around like January 2024.
Yep. A little bit before, just before the end of the year, 2023.
Okay.
When Jerome Powell came out and said, most likely we're going to lower interest rates a couple times next year. And we're as high as we're going to be. It's not going to get worse. Okay, we can start making decisions because we can at least plan a little bit. But now, since then, inflation has, kind of reminded us that it's still around, at least showing up in CPI, which I think, some of those numbers are a little bit bogus. But either way, the economy is still really strong, stronger than anyone anticipated. And so now they're trying to throw some cold water on the idea of, rate cuts. And so people are having some second guesses, not as bullish, but still in a much more positive opinion than have been in, since 2022, essentially.
Yeah. So, we're emerging from a trough that basically, exactly lasted from like Q3 2022 up until Q4 of 2023. So a year and a half. That's long, and I think people are ready to transact again.
Yeah. So question number 1 on the survey, and then we'll move on to some other things. How are apartment market conditions in the local markets that you watch, which it's a lot of local markets? Tight markets are defined as those with low vacancies and high rent increases. Conditions obviously vary greatly from place to place, but on balance, apartment market conditions in your market today are tighter than 3 months ago, 20%. This is April 2024, by the way. Looser than 3 months ago, 37%. So a lot of people are saying that, it's decently loose. But unchanged, 42%, 1% doesn't know. I think that's interesting. More people are saying that it is a little bit, back in January, back in October, almost no one was saying tighter.
Yeah.
And everyone was saying looser. In January, 59%, in October, 64%. So there has been a shift here. In some markets, not all, because in the Sun Belt it's still relatively loose, but in some markets you are seeing people seeing some really solid apartment fundamentals and performance, which is being reflected in the data. Because when we look at, whether it's Real Pages numbers or anyone else's, we're seeing that, really starting at the end of Q4 of 23. And so far, the first half of 24, we're seeing some really strong demand numbers and really good leasing and traffic. So that makes a lot of sense. Let's see any of these other questions, Matt, you wanna highlight today?
No, not necessarily. I just think that it's important to note that these are the actual specific questions that people are asking. It's not like, what do you think? Is it better or worse? It is there, and the people's opinions on these questions are framed by the phrasing. So, for example, when it talks about debt financing, whether it's better or worse, the specific question is, what about the conditions for multifamily mortgage borrowing, considering both interest rates and non-rate terms compared to 3 years ago? Well, 13% thinks it's better. 24% thinks it's worse. 59%
3 months ago.
Yeah, well, compared to 3 months ago, 59 thinks it's unchanged from 3 months ago.
Yeah, but so like 3 months ago, they thought that it was now a better. 3 months ago in January, 45% now is a better time to borrow. In April, 13% said now is a better time to borrow. But 59 said unchanged from 3 months ago.
Yeah.
But 3 months ago was now a better time to borrow. So it's a little bit of a feedback loop that I'm not sure with some loss.
This is the one where you it's worth digging into because it takes away some of the edge of the debt financing opinion. So they think it's getting a little bit worse. Well, if you read into it, most people think it's about the same.
Well, exactly. Well, but this makes it look like it's worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, because someone could have said 3 months ago, this is the best environment to ever borrow. Like, I'm so bullish. How do you feel now? I feel the same.
Yeah.
So bullish. And like, okay, well, you're not going to say it's a better time to borrow. You're just saying it's
for sure.
You're just saying it's the best time to borrow.
And it is interesting that whether you when you look at these questions, it's this gauge of change, and the irony kind of is that the sentiment can be positive while for debt especially the real numbers are not nominally. I think that it is more a fact of what they're thinking of the future, and maybe the prices make more sense to borrow in this environment than before. I just think that there is the predictability is a little bit better. It just makes things a little bit easier.
I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, you can predict, you can transact. Talk about this a lot. That these deals take 90 days, 120 days to close from you decide you're going to do the deal. And so a lot can change over 90, 120 days, especially in terms of interest rates. But this is an interesting survey. I think there's a lot of value to it. But I think you have to be careful because the questions that they're asking are relatively nuanced. It's not necessarily saying, are interest rates high or is debt good? It's just, how do you feel about it? And is it getting better or is it getting worse? You're really looking at the future. Yeah. And so the respondent could misunderstand the question and not answer it correctly. They could answer based on like a very recent experience. Yeah. Yeah. Like I just got screwed on this deal. And,
exactly. Yeah. Things bleed together. Probably the sense of
the average you'd think, take some of that out, but for the large enough sample size. But then, you can interpret it correctly also. And so I think there's a lot of information in this survey, but it tells us a lot, but you want to be maybe careful exactly how you interpret it.
Especially, just to return for just the briefest moment when the number was 3. The number for debt availability was 3 in July 2022. The interest rates at that moment were probably just as low. Maybe the interest rates were 0.3 or ultimately 3%. Compared to now, we're at 4.6 on the 10-year, 5.25 on the Fed funds rate. Nominally worse, but again, if you're looking forward, then it's a sense of change, not a sense of where it is.
I mean, that time it's like we're tightening, we're raising interest rates, we're going in the opposite direction that you want to go into. And then at that period of time, also we were dealing with record high prices. Yeah. And so it was we couldn't, people were having a very difficult time making sense of the prices before rates started increasing. Yeah. It was getting silly, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And then when the rates start bumping up, it's like, no, well, none of this makes sense. Like the financing isn't there, but it doesn't work. Yeah. It makes no sense. Especially, again, that shock of some cold water thrown on our face. We're used to 0% interest rates. Okay, how is
anything's
get
bad
ready for 5 and a quarter.
Yeah.
You're going to go up 500 basis points. Are you ready to go? And at that point, it was 75 basis points a couple times in a row, and
that's
the rest
good.
is history.
Good point.
Fannie Mae's got a piece, Matt, on these office to multifamily conversions. And first, I just have to say, when people hear me talk about this, I'm usually talking about it in a negative light. Yeah. And just to be clear, I think the right office to multifamily conversion is an incredible idea and something that is a worthwhile endeavor and is worth looking into because we've got a lot of office space. We're not sure what we're going to do with all of it. I also think that people are overly discounting the office market. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of tons of challenges. But again, I'm not in the office space. This is not something that I'm doing, but I think that you could probably find some opportunities to steal office buildings that people will still have uses for in the future. not my business. I'm not going to wade into it. But so that all being said,
that was one of the wild cards that they throw out there as kind of an aside or not, is that the tale's not written for office buildings and the downtowns that they populate.
Yeah.
And so it leads to some underwriting challenges where like, yeah, you're going to convert this, but like, are people going to think of are people going to go there, come to your apartments if they think if it's an office building, or are all the office tenants really going to pour out all at once? Like, there's just so much uncertainty that makes it difficult to predict whether an apartment building is going to do well if all the other office buildings are emptying out, or maybe they stay full. We just don't know yet, and so much is still being negotiated, and probably will for the next like 5 years.
Yeah,
but
I think what the linchpin is, what are the subsidies going to look like? Because most of these projects aren't going to be able to get off the ground without some local subsidies, which maybe means that again. Maybe it will be a great thing in some cases. Will be a bad, some bad projects will be funded.
Projects, but I wonder if it does seem like it's all these strings attached. Or couldn't choke you, but it could get projects finished, and it could lead to at least something's there where people are using it rather than an empty office building that's taking a while to find a buyer. I don't know. That's the only thing is if things get quicker when the government helps. And I don't know if that's actually true.
I don't know. I mean, quicker the things that otherwise couldn't be done. Maybe for no reason at all. Maybe for
and what they do say, and we'll get. I'm sorry.
It's like no one's willing to put capital, but the taxpayers will do it.
Yeah,
because there's no who will accept a low or no return. Well, the taxpayers will.
Yeah. Well, and they did say that they didn't actually mention subsidies as much as policy and kind of deregulatory efforts as a way of pushing forward development. But
sure. So what are some of the other takeaways on this piece from Fannie Mae?
One of the things that they lead off with is a discussion of the amount of conversions that have taken place, and that maybe
really
have potential.
Me.
I was ready. I kind of was pre-writing this because we have talked about this topic a lot. We have our own opinions of it that we've just shared just now. One of the opinions that I had was, well, this has got to be a drop in the bucket. And for some places, like in LA County, commercial to residential conversions take up to 30% of total production. And there's also research finding that 400,000 additional apartment units could be converted from urban office buildings nationwide, which is a lot, but that could be, that's possibility, not an eventuality. And also, I want to note that they're talking about commercial to office. So that could be a strip mall, that could be a hotel. The language gets a little slippery. And also, I just love the idea of this thought, and I like it. I like the idea. You drive by an office building, it's empty. We have a housing need, turn it into apartments. We've talked about that a lot. And what's interesting is I've been hearing ads for like a podcast, an expert take on office to residential conversions. This is kind of like a mainstream podcast.
Yeah.
Like we dig deep on it, and they say,
Did you listen to it?
No, I just heard the ad because I don't want. What am I going to gain for it? I'll have to chase down. I forgot. I just rolled my eyes and changed the channel. But I will summarize it right now. I'll give all that value in a very condensed summary, probably, of what they're going to say. I think that the converting office buildings is hard because regulations say that every single bedroom needs a window. I could stop the summary right there and just say, like, that's the biggest challenge. You can put as many bedrooms as you want on the outer perimeter of an office building, but you got that big chunk inside the building that you're not going to be able to do anything with unless you have like super weird bowling alleys in the middle of your living room or whatever.
Space storage.
Yeah, and then there's also plumbing and guts of the building that would need to be redone. But again, like that's the first thing that pops in my mind, and it's the easiest to picture is like, okay, so every bedroom needs a window, every apartment needs a bedroom, and so you're going to have every apartment has to be connected to the exterior of that office building. Now, if they talk about it, I'm repeating myself from like 2 years ago when we first started. They call office buildings floor plates. Yeah. Plates are these wide things. They are, and so if you're going up the skinny little perimeter of something wide, you're gonna have a lot of unused space. And I brought up, again, 4 years ago when we talked about this, why can't you just core down the middle of the building? I said it as a joke, and then like 2 years later after that, there were projects that were like, oh yeah, well, all we're doing is coring down the middle of this building. So so it's like you got to do some drastic, almost silly things to make these projects work.
Yeah, in many of the cases, it would be cheaper to just tear the building down and build new.
And that's what I think they're counting. So another kind of slippery language, yeah, they're talking about office to residential, or maybe it's a hotel, but also what is a conversion versus an adaptive reuse? When I'm talking about coring down the middle of a
We're all
office
talking
building,
about adaptive reuse.
yeah, it's adaptive. That's the exciting one.
You take the thing that's there and you adapt it to reuse it
Yeah.
from office to apartments.
And what they're counting in some of these, particularly actually, the LA County conversions, they're talking about redevelopment, tear it down, build another one up. So most of it is, when these stats for conversions and these numbers come up, they're really talking about like infill or just redevelopment. And maybe it is worth including them in the conversion discussion, because that might have like a zoning, relevance for zoning, like maybe if it's zoned for office,
they have to rezone.
There. So
well, either way, you have to get it zoned properly, and that makes sense. If you can buy the office building for basically the price of the dirt, including the cost to tear it down.
Yeah.
Which, to get to that basis, that's where the subsidies sometimes come in. It's like, we're going to spend $1 million to demo and haul all this away.
Yeah.
Help us tear it. We'll build it, but just help us foot the bill to like knock this thing down.
Yeah.
That, I think, is going to make more sense than forcing, the square peg into the round hole, which is almost literally what is attempted to be done. Like the whole idea of putting the core down the middle, like that makes no sense.
I know, but there are like projects, or
I'm sure there are cases
non-jokingly discussed.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some cases where it does work, and they're like, actually, I don't know.
Yeah. How do you do it? I don't know.
But here's the thing. Let people do this where it makes sense. But in no paradigm is this the solution to the housing crisis.
Yeah.
It certainly, certainly in cities, it's a local issue of, you have a building that is being underutilized or absolutely not utilized. And you want to figure out how best to utilize it again.
Yeah.
Again, I think that we're making a few snap decisions on, we're writing off anyone working in offices ever again. Like I think the pendulum, and this relates to the city as well, and we talked about this last week also. The suburbs are the place to be, but again, I would just be cautious in writing off cities in general, and no one's working downtown, and no one's going to be living downtown. I think the rate of growth will be lower than it was over the last decade, but it will still be growing and compounding off of that growth, I think at a slightly lower rate.
Yeah.
Reasons to go to the suburbs, but again, now the valuations are going to be, the prices in the suburbs are going to be so high, and the city is so low.
Well, and also all these suburbs are making these mini little city center spaces, so they are acknowledging, this, just to use an example of Indianapolis, like at Carmel, they have a little downtown, even like
little urban,
even like
core.
Fisher's kind of there's like there are denser areas in these suburb communities that are forming that are quite city-like, or at least have the same, a very similar makeup if you're comparing it to the subdivisions of a suburb.
Yeah, there's just some people that they don't like. There's some people who kind of like the grit, and they like the old. They like the old and the new.
Yeah.
Then there's some people who just really like the new, clean, and they don't want somebody begging for money on the corner and get back in the G-Wagon and on the way home.
Yeah. What you noted, there are a couple good quotes on that. They make a point about redevelopment and conversions, and they say, there's limited data on the volume of conversions in the U.S., which, all right, well, that's great. We kind of nailed that down. But existing studies suggest that conversions from redevelopment have outpaced conversions from adaptive reuse. Most of the commercial to residential conversions in California have taken place with redevelopment or on a vacant commercially zoned land. So it's the zoning that's the conversion. And then
that hardly counts. They just rezoned it from off. They didn't even knock it down. That's like,
conversion
I
in
mean,
some way. But
that's just a development.
Yeah,
that's just what you do.
I know. Well, and the thing that we talked about, where every bedroom needs a window, they say practically this limits the depth of residential structures to about 60 feet for a double loaded corridor. I said maybe you're building a large Viking dining hall in each unit, I don't know, or bowling alley or whatever. But there's also ADA compliance things, and in terms of what has worked in the past, I've mentioned the kind of deregulatory things, waiving things like seismic upgrades, fitting the project type to the location, and building and the building site. So, for example, building a luxury apartment building where there used to be a nice office building. That may make sense. You may not want to build a market or like a workforce housing thing there. That may not make sense.
We're gonna build to the demographic who can't pay as much in rent.
Yeah. That's a little obvious, but much like that study from McKinsey that we actually covered last year, the year before, it was one of the many returns to this subject. Fannie Mae suggests that a varied mix of residential and commercial uses can create more stability for urban economies. But as I mentioned before, there is that unpredictability. Like, what is going to happen with downtown? I don't think it's worth counting out, but it's
uncertain.
Yeah, it's uncertain. There is opportunities to exploit. There may be opportunities that underwriters, particularly like lending underwriters, see as like, oh, I don't know, maybe it won't come back. So there is a lack of predictability that could lead to, I think, profitability if you make the right decision.
Yeah. And I've just found people have very different opinions and experiences related to offices and downtowns. Yeah. Like, I mean, you talk to some people and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to the office ever again. Like, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Other folks are like, oh yeah, this work from home thing. Like, it's the absolute worst. Yeah. Like, we got to get people back in the office. You need to be in the office. And then same thing with downtowns. It's either like, hey, downtown's a lot of fun. It's a good time. No, we're back at it. And then you hear from other folks that are saying, is it safe to even go near downtown? And like, I haven't heard anyone who goes there. Yeah. And are they still protesting George Floyd to this day? Yeah. And so difference of opinions. Yeah,
that it will be interesting. And this is something that we've discussed about remote work and the in-person people, and how, if you show up to work, maybe you'll get promoted sooner than someone that's a remote worker. There are a lot of these little features of the remote work thing that could shake out and bring people back to the office. If all of your buddies are getting promoted because they show up and you're a remote worker, maybe that's going to bring you back into the office.
Yeah, but you have to work.
It's a mess.
You need to work like 25% harder, produce 25% more remotely than you do in the office, I feel like. Yeah. To even maintain. Yeah. To be like, all right, you can stay working at home. You have to be like, they are so productive at home, like they are just crushing it, like, let's just don't rock the boat. They just let them keep doing their thing. If you're just doing your job, like, it's not gonna cut it. And I know that's like a not nice or not on trend thing to say.
Well, it's visibility.
But it's like, where are you? What are you doing? There's a little bit of a lack of trust here. And
I think that it's probably differs from industry to industry, but like, obviously if your boss sees you working, then that's a little bit better than if he doesn't see you and the work gets done. I don't know. Yeah, there's like some psychological effect to that.
And if you're going to procrastinate, might as well just procrastinate at work.
Yeah. That's funny. That's good.
Not that anyone should do that, but I'm just saying, it's not like procrastination began during COVID.
Yeah, well, and going back to the downtown thing, it is a workplace is also a place of exchange of ideas. It's where different people can kind of meet up and talk with each other, and it's hard to get that organic.
Yeah, it's actually challenging. I'm in the office 5 days. Pretty much we're all in the office 5 days a week. It's hard for me sometimes in the office because I do feel like as an owner or whatever. Checking in, having personal conversations with people, in person is good. And I don't know if I do it for me or if it's for the rest, for the rest of the team, or just to make sure we're having not just messages on Zoom, because just so much gets lost. And, there's a lot of conversation, or opinions, which I don't disagree with, of that. Like, you shouldn't have any meetings. It should all just be a system, which I agree with. But and again, maybe it's just me, but it's like there's a long for that personal connection and collaboration. But when I really need to get things done, I need to get out of the office.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that's where that flexibility comes into place.
Yeah.
Because like we have to finish. We got quarterly reports that are going out this week, Matt. Great Capital. And I do video reports for all the properties.
Yeah.
And investor relations teams, we're going to finalize some reports, have to review the reports. And, I just have to lock myself in a room to do all of this. But, a lot of great people that work here, and we have a lot of fun things happening. And it's easy. And I'm getting distracted with work. Just other work.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the benefits of Office, too, is like you can have a tiny idea. Maybe that doesn't make it into a meeting, and you could share that, and that can kind of grow, and as a sounding board, rather than playing something out and wasting everyone's time when you realize that's a bad idea. Well, you didn't have that opportunity to test it out with other people.
Yeah. Sometimes you never know. And there's a balance of hey, this could have been we had a meeting, this could have been an email. Yeah, you're just telling us something. All right, this could have been an email. To then all of a sudden we haven't actually gotten together. And
so here's an example.
For so long.
I don't want to bring this up in a meeting, but I thought at our apartment complexes, what if we have as a marketing tool, have a small kitten or puppy that just lives at the clubhouse, and I want to rent there because it's got the cat, it's got the puppy. I haven't tested this out. I haven't gotten very good feedback on it, so I'm not going to waste a whole lot of people's time. But it's a great idea.
I don't disagree. I don't know with fair, a lot of people are allergic to animals.
Yeah.
Again, anything new that we're doing on the property management side, the first thing is like, okay, fair housing.
Yeah.
Are some people afraid of dogs or cats? And are you, could it be interpreted?
Yeah.
And this is what, Matt. So okay, good idea. A cute puppy in the office.
Yeah.
Who would want a cute puppy? But then someone comes around and says, there's certain groups of people who, historically are afraid of dogs, and you are pushing those people away purposely. You're targeting certain other racial demographics by using that dog. And I was physically intimidated to enter the leasing office.
See, I haven't even said it's the property would have the dog. So it's the property manager would take care of the dog, and if they leave someone else, it's not their dog. No, the next person, the dog just lives at the club. Oh, I've got this all playing out. That's so sad.
So anyways.
Yeah. This is the kind of, but you don't get this, and
I think we're making a great argument for working from home.
Well, I don't know, maybe. All right, we can move into something more meaningful. I'm gonna put a pin in that.
Let's put a pin on it. Other than there is an example. This is just relevant, I guess, for the conversation. Is that not all of these projects are as straightforward?
The office to residential conversion.
Yeah, the office to residential conversion. As we're still on that topic, there was an office to residential play that was foreclosed on very recently. This came out in The Real Deal this last week. No real comment on kind of the players involved or what happened, other than ended in a deed in lieu foreclosure and did not work out. A little bit easier said than done.
It looks like, based on some of the details they're providing in this article.
Oh, I walked by this building last week, man.
Oh, see, and it looks like a nice building. You got a Morton Steakhouse.
Oh, yeah,
at the bottom,
it's in the
very great.
Yeah, it's in the loop. This was right on our little commute to the conference last week.
And I think that one of the reasons, at least that's described in this article, was there were tenants in the building, and it was difficult for them to find another place, and maybe they were paying for these tenants to rent somewhere else so that they can get the project started. Whatever it is, and maybe I'm even wrong on these tenants, but the ultimate thing was they had this project plan. There were unanticipated challenges and delays, and you still have to keep paying that loan. And so whatever it is, maybe the construction equipment was broken, for a month or so.
Yeah,
well, the loans still due. It doesn't matter what the whole reason is. I think that the lesson there, and maybe I'm wrong, but my gut feeling is you got to get these projects off the ground as quickly as possible. And a project,
time is money.
And a project that is as complicated as a conversion, whether that's ground up or building a new building inside another building, that's got to take a little bit more time than just building something from the ground up.
Yeah, those carry costs can can eat away at you.
Gotta
All
keep
right.
paying loans.
All right. Now let's move away from conversions and specifically multifamily and get into a little bit more broad take on the economy. A new piece from Moody's. U.S. consumers, remain resilient, but blemishes exist. Man, I don't know. Are we going to put on the cover up the whatever? The makeup.
Yeah. I don't. I don't know if we're going to use concealer, but
concealer. That's it. That's the one. You can tell the makeup crew here for Capital is on point.
The upshot here, and maybe I said this earlier, is this seems like higher for longer. The kind of underlying vibe that I'm getting here is we're settling in for higher for longer, and maybe the outlook is not as dismal in terms of sentiment than it otherwise
high for longer growth, interest rates, all of the above.
Kind of all of the above. That's so savings. So I'll start with the blemishes because it's easier to talk about those really quick here. Savings is taking a hit. It was lower in 2022, but the next lowest point compared to now was August of 2008. Consumer debt is a little bit of a blemish as well, with a rising amount of credit card balances that are past due. And also the month's supply of housing inventory, while it's up from its 2022 lows, is still well below the long-term average or the kind of shorter-term 2015 to 2019 average. Right now it's at 3.2x. The long-term average is 5x, and that 2015 to 2019 number is 4.2x. So we're about a third lower or more of the houses that we are, that are on the market that have inventory that people can, come and live in. Yeah. So housing's tight. Consumer savings and consumer credit shaky. Interest rates are high. Those are some pretty big blemishes. But on the other hand, you got Jamie Dimon. Now I don't have his article up here, and it's not cited in here. I just read it like this morning. Jamie Dimon saying that the economy is doing really well, and this previous jobs report was really strong. Retail sales increased 0.7% month over month and 4.0% year over year. So things are active and moving in many parts of the economy. And so that that question is, what's the Fed chair going to do? These things about credit and savings, that's the big worry point for me.
Let's look at that real quick on the credit. Who's past due in terms of their credit card balances, percentage of balances that are past due? It's fascinating because on one hand, bring it down to 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. The 30 days, we've broken out of the the pre-pandemic average of 3%. We're 3.5% right now. But on the real past due, so that's like you didn't pay like on time, but you paid within the next before the next bill came. But the 90 days past due, which is really the worrisome. Okay, that's when like you haven't paid for 3 months. And you just have you're really building a balance. That's still lower than pre-pandemic numbers. I mean, we're still at 1.75 ish, relative to pre-pandemic. Sorry, no, you're right. So no, we're just about pre-pandemic as well on both.
Yeah, it does seem like that 90 days is it's not as dramatic of an increase, and for sure the biggest increase is in that 30 days. 90 days, we're comparing, now to about where we were at 2013.
Sorry, yeah, no, I misinterpreted the 60 in the 90 days. So yeah, we're basically back at 2013 levels just after the great financial crisis. Up a percentage point from pre-pandemic. The trend is not great.
Yeah, the trend.
The trend is not great.
A trend that really got going, it seems like, by the end of Q1 in 2021, and has just been steadily moving up.
I always take these types of this information with a grain of salt because it's a big number, but there's a lot of nuance in this, and there's a lot of made up of a lot of different types of borrowers. And I could also have made an argument that in 2019 or 2018 or any point in the last cycle that was an incredible economic run, that credit card debt is inching up. It's inching up. We're in a multi-year high. Now we're almost at 3% when we were at 2%, a couple years ago. So unless I'm talking about, in the middle of COVID, when credit card debt, dropped down because everyone was getting free money and stimmy checks, at every single point in the last cycle, I could have said that consumer debt is getting out of hand, is increasing.
Yeah.
Now, this is definitely a different growth rate. And I don't want to say that, okay, this time is the same as last time. This time could be different. But I think it's one metric.
Well, and this is in the wake of a pandemic like that. I'm still asking myself, like, okay, so how are we really going to pay for all of this? Yeah, there was an initial recession, and you mentioned like the probably recession that we had. But how many families incurred a lot of these expenses and are continuing to incur them?
I think a lot. I mean, inflation has just made everything a little bit tighter. There's just a little bit less left over, if anything, at the end of the month, and oftentimes it's negative. You've had to go into a little bit of a debt to cover a bill, to get that, to fill that grocery cart, to get the milk and the eggs and the diapers. You've already paid rent. Your checking account balance is at zero. Your kids have to eat. You're using a credit card to buy some food.
That's a really good point. I wonder how much of this is a reflection of inflation. Yeah. And it's like, I'm getting the same eggs. They're costing this much. I'm still getting the eggs. I'll put it on the credit card.
Again, if I had to, give a reason, that's the primary reason.
Yeah. That makes a little bit more sense than like the kind of idea of paying for the pandemic. But
I wonder, and I don't think that this is taken into account on this survey because it says it's just credit card data. But, a lot of the buy now, pay later policies like Affirm and things like that have really popped up over the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
I also wonder how that has contributed to just consumer debt in general, making those purchases seeming a little bit easier, stretching the payments out. Maybe you're paying interest, maybe you're not. Savings rate, Matt. This is, again, people don't have the savings. So what are they going to do? They're putting on a credit card. Savings rate is at a basically lowest point since 2008.
Yeah, this is the real scary one. It dipped down in 2022 to really, really low, and then it's peaked up at the end of 2023. It looks like, and it's slowly mid 2023, and it's kind of petering down. Not quite at where we were in 2022, but our savings rate is awfully low. It is, they tracked it again. It's about where it was in August of 2008, and that wasn't a particularly great time for the economy. Then again, it isn't too much lower than the savings rate was from 2012 all the way until 2018. Yeah. So that could just be we're hovering a little bit below the norm. Yes, if you compare it to the incredibly high savings rate, like above 30% that we had in 2020 when, like, I guess this was the stimulus checks. That's crazy, but I think that we're about around normal. This is less worrying to me.
The pandemic messed up all the graphs.
I know it did. Yeah. You can't exactly, and now you can't
because you can't really see the differences between over time because look,
cut it off.
Some will do that just because it's almost not important. I mean, it is, or you have any different type of scale.
Yeah, so there's blemishes. There is, but I think there really is some optimism. There's optimism in the multifamily market as well as the general economy. I don't want to make it seem like we're only focusing on the negative because, again, according to surveys, things are approaching the 50% mark of normalcy where you can actually make a decent deal and work for your money. And I think that that's really promising for a lot of people.
I think now there's confusion. Now it's time to take action on things that you can be confident about. Confident in multifamily.
It's not perfect.
Take advantage of the fog of war. It's not perfect. Can't predict. And question anybody who'd really thinks they've got the answer because they don't. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you subscribe to the Great Capital YouTube channel. You stick around for next week's episode. And if you got anything out of this episode, leave us a comment below. All right. Thanks. See you next week.